A crystal glass shattered inches from Evangeline Sterling's worn shoes, splashing her with cheap champagne while the laughter of Manhattan's elite echoed through the grand auction house. Her ex-fiance, Julian Vance, sneered from the stage, publicly mocking her family's recent bankruptcy before the entire old money crowd. Evangeline stood frozen in her fading dress, her fingers tightening around her empty purse. The public humiliation cut deeper than any physical blow, yet she refused to let them see her cry. Standing directly behind her in the shadows was Valerius Vance, a quiet man she had hired an hour ago from a low-cost security agency using her last $50. He wore a heavy, faded black coat, keeping his head low and his hands tucked into his pockets. Julian stepped down from the platform, his polished leather shoes clicking sharply against the marble floor as he approached her with an arrogant smile. "Look at you, Evangeline, reduced to picking up scraps with the help of a rental guard who looks like he belongs in a homeless shelter," Julian said, his voice carrying across the quieted room. Evangeline lifted her chin, staring directly into his mocking eyes. "My family paid our debts, Julian, which is more than anyone can say for your crooked investments." Julian's face darkened with instant rage. He lunged forward and aggressively grabbed her right wrist, his heavy gold ring cutting into her soft skin. A sharp line of dark red blood welled up and dripped onto the white floor. Valerius froze. His chest stopped moving, and his entire body went rigid as the metallic scent of her blood hit the air. The secret hybrid king, who had ruled the underground covens for 3 centuries, felt his absolute restraint snap. His eyes flared with a lethal golden fire that he quickly concealed behind long lashes. Valerius stepped out of the darkness, moving with a silent, terrifying grace that made the nearby guests instinctively draw back. He pulled a pristine silk handkerchief from his breast pocket and gently pressed it against Evangeline's bleeding wrist, completely ignoring Julian's presence. Julian barked a laugh, looking at the tattered sleeve of the guard. "Get your filthy hands off her, loser, or I will have my security drag you into the alley and break both your legs." Valerius slowly removed his worn leather gloves, revealing a heavy platinum signet ring engraved with an ancient crest. Julian looked closer at the crest, and the color drained from his face until he was as pale as ash. His knees buckled. He dropped heavily to the marble floor, his voice trembling uncontrollably as he whispered the true title of the original ruler. Valerius gripped Julian by the throat with his bare hand, effortlessly lifting the grown man 3 feet into the air. "You just touched what belongs to me, insignificant little man," Valerius murmured, his voice rich with centuries of tattered authority. The room plunged into absolute silence. Evangeline stared in complete shock as the terrifying guard she hired for $50 held her powerful ex-fiance in midair. Before we go on, what do you think Valerius should do to the man who hurt his queen? Subscribe to follow their story, and tell me where you're watching from. Valerius tossed the gasping nobleman backward onto the polished floor with a careless flick of his wrist. Julian slid 5 feet across the marble, coughing violently and clutching his bruised throat while his entourage retreated into the terrified crowd. The crystal chandeliers overhead seemed to hum with an oppressive, freezing energy that radiated directly from the undercover guard. Evangeline stood paralyzed, her gaze darting between her trembling hands and the man she had hired an hour ago for $50. The tattered fabric of his coat no longer made him look small. He stepped toward her, his posture entirely altered into that of a monarch commanding a battlefield. "Your hand, Evangeline," Valerius murmured, his voice dropping into a smooth, velvet tone that completely ignored the gasping elite around them. She slowly extended her right arm, her fingers shaking as the silk handkerchief absorbed the small line of red blood. Julian struggled to his feet, leaning heavily against a mahogany display table as several elite guards rushed into the hall with drawn weapons. "Kill him," Julian wheezed, pointing a shaking finger at Valerius. He is an intruder, a threat to this entire gathering. The guards moved forward, but the heavy iron doors of the auction house suddenly groaned shut, locking out the night air. The temperature plummeted 20 degrees in an instant, turning the breath of the wealthy socialites into visible white mist. Valerius did not look back at the encroaching guards. He slowly lifted his hand, tilting his platinum ring toward the light so the engraved crescent crest blazed clearly before the room. The captain of the estate guards blinked at the crest, his weapon slipping from his fingers and clattering loudly onto the stone. "Stand down," the captain commanded, his voice breaking with immediate terror. He dropped heavily to both knees, bowing his head until his forehead touched the caved-in floorboards. One by one, every aristocratic vampire in the room recognized the ancient mark, their eyes widening in absolute horror. They abandoned their champagne flutes, dropping to their knees in a synchronized wave of frantic submission. Julian stared at his own guards, his mouth opening and closing as his knees began to buckle under a crushing force he could not see. "Valerius," Evangeline whispered, her voice a fragile sound in the vast, freezing siphoned hall. "What are they doing?" The hybrid king turned his gold-gilded eyes toward her, the lethal fire melting into a quiet, protective warmth. He reached out, his cool palm supporting her elbow as he guided her toward the center aisle. Julian fell to his hands and knees, staring at the white marble as Valerius passed him without a second glance. "The sterling debt is settled, Julian, and your territory now belongs to the crown," Valerius announced, his deep voice resonating through the stone walls like thunder. He escorted Evangeline through the double doors, leaving the elite court shivering on their knees in the dark room. A sleek black limousine waited at the curb, its human driver already bowing low. Valerius opened the door for her, his elegant hand welcoming her into the leather interior. Evangeline climbed inside, the quiet luxury hiding her confusion. Valerius slipped onto the seat opposite her, his dark curls catching the streetlights. "We are going to my estate on the northern cliffs, Evangeline," he said quietly, sliding a glass of water toward her. "You are safe there, but our shared journey has only just begun." The black limousine glided smoothly past the iron gates of a massive estate located on a secluded northern cliff, 30 miles away from the chaotic auction hall. Evangeline gripped her glass of water tightly, her fingers tracing the fine crystal as she stared at the man sitting opposite her in the leather seat. Valerius looked completely relaxed, his tattered coat thrown carelessly over his shoulders while his dark curls caught the passing streetlights. Evangeline opened her mouth to ask a question, but the vehicle quietly came to a complete stop before a sweeping limestone manor. Valerius stepped out first, offering his cool palm to guide her onto the stone driveway. He escorted her into a grand entrance hall where the floors were carved from absolute white marble. A tall, elegant woman dressed in an emerald silk gown walked down the master staircase with a cautious expression. This was Rebecca, Valerius's younger sister. Rebecca stopped 10 feet away from them, her sharp eyes scanning Evangeline's torn sleeve and bruised wrist before settling on her brother's rigid posture. "Valerius, the Southern covens are already buzzing about what happened at Manhattan's elite gathering," Rebecca said, her voice dropping into a serious tone. "Julian Vance has filed an official complaint with the Supreme Council, claiming you violated the ancient undercover agreement." Valerius did not look up from Evangeline's wound. He adjusted the pristine silk handkerchief, his movements precise and calm. "Julian touched what belongs to the crown, Rebecca, and his territory now belongs to us," Valerius murmured. Evangeline looked between the siblings, her confusion growing with every unfamiliar word. "Who are you people, and why did Julian bow to a security guard?" Evangeline asked directly, her voice echoing slightly in the vast space. Valerius turned his golden eyes toward her, his features softening into a quiet warmth. "I am the original hybrid ruler," Evangeline, and I have spent 3 centuries keeping my identity hidden from humans," Valerius explained. Rebecca stepped closer, her expression turning toward genuine concern. "Brother, you cannot simply keep a human woman in your private quarters while the council prepares a retaliatory trial." Valerius adjusted his platinum signet ring, his jaw clenching slightly. "She remains here under my personal protection, Rebecca, and no one from the council will cross my boundary." He turned back to Evangeline, guiding her toward a beautifully furnished guest suite in the West Wing. The room held a deep mahogany desk, covered in ancient journals and windows, overlooking a freezing garden. "Rest now, Evangeline," Valerius said softly, stepping back into the shadow of the doorway. Evangeline sat on the edge of the velvet bed, watching his tall figure disappear into the long hallway. Rebecca met her brother in the adjoining study, slamming a heavy leather ledger onto the table. "Julian has already allied with the master hunters, Valerius," Rebecca warned quietly. "They know her blood is the only key to breaking the crown's shield." Valerius poured himself a dark liquid, his gaze fixed on the fireplace. "Let them come," he whispered. A sharp knock suddenly rattled the main entrance doors downstairs. Valerius froze, his pupils dilating as a distant, metallic scent traveled through the cold air. The old enemy had found the cliff. The glass door of the study vibrated under the weight of the echo from the entrance hall below, causing Valerius to place his crystal tumbler down onto the dark oak desk without breaking eye contact with his sister. Rebecca stepped sideways toward the heavy curtains, her hand pulling back a narrow sliver of fabric to scan the long stone driveway stretching into the freezing darkness of the cliffs. Evangeline emerged from her designated guest room across the landing, her fingers lightly gripping the polished wood of the balustrade as she navigated the dim corridor toward the source of the sound. She stood close to the entrance of the study, her voice low and demanding. "Valerius, someone is trying to take down your front entrance gates," she stated, her heart rate elevated but her posture remaining straight. Valerius moved past her with incredible speed, his hand extending to block her path before she could take another step toward the staircase. "Stay inside this room with Rebecca, Evangeline," he instructed, his velvet voice holding an unarguable authority that resonated through the timber beams. The iron knockers rattled for a third time, followed by a heavy groan of splintering wood as the lock gave way entirely. Valerius vanished down the grand staircase, leaving the 2 women in the shadow of the upper landing. Evangeline leaned over the railing, watching his tall figure emerge into the center of the white marble hall, just as 3 men in heavy tactical gear breached the threshold. The leader of the intruders stepped forward, holding a silver vial filled with a glowing, amber fluid that turned the visible mist of the room into a hazy tint. This was Julian's chief enforcer, a lethal mercenary named Marcus, who had spent decades hunting down rogue bloodlines for the Supreme Council. Marcus raised the vial toward the light, his lip curling into an arrogant smile. "Valerius Vance, the Council has issued a warrant for the removal of the human stowaway under your roof," Marcus announced, his voice carrying clearly up to the landing. Valerius stood perfectly still in the center of the hall, his face pale and unreadable under the dim chandelier. "You crossed the iron boundary of my estate without my permission, Marcus," Valerius replied casually, his tone almost pleasant as he adjusted the platinum signet ring on his finger. Marcus laughed, a sharp sound that echoed off the high limestone walls. "Your crown died a century ago when you chose to hide among the mortals, and your boundaries mean nothing to the council now." Marcus sneered, gesturing for his 2 men to advance toward the staircase where Evangeline was hiding. Valerius did not draw a weapon. He took a single step forward, his pupils dilating completely until his eyes turned into an endless darkness that swallowed the golden reflection of the light. The air pressure in the grand hall dropped instantly, forcing Marcus to take a step back as his breathing became shallow and difficult. Valerius materialized directly in front of the first mercenary, his hand gripping the man's chest plate and driving him into the stone column with a dull throb. The second intruder lunged, but Valerius caught his wrist, twisting it sharply until the heavy iron weapon dropped onto the marble floor. Marcus scrambled backward toward the open doorway, his bravado evaporating as he recognized the ancient hybrid strength unleashed before him. "The council will burn your cliffs to the ground for this betrayal, Valerius," Marcus yelled, his fingers trembling as he struggled to uncork the amber fluid. Valerius turned his gaze toward the doorway, his voice dropping into a dangerous whisper. "Tell Julian that I am no longer hiding." Marcus retreated through the splintered threshold of the entrance, his boots dragging against the stone steps as his two unconscious operatives slid down the white marble floor behind him. Valerius stood entirely still in the absolute center of the hall, his dark coat hanging open while the golden fire in his pupils slowly receded into dark obsidian. Upstairs on the landing, Evangeline released her tight grip on the wooden balustrade, her breathing shallow as she looked down at the silent wreckage below. Rebecca emerged from the adjoining study, her emerald silk gown rustling against the limestone floorboards as she approached her brother with a rigid, ice-cold composure. "You let the enforcer escape, Valerius, which means the council will know exactly how long you have been masking your strength under human disguises," Rebecca said, her voice dropping into a severe, sharp tone. Valerius did not look up at the master staircase. He took a heavy linen napkin from his pocket, methodically wiping the small trace of mercenary blood from his platinum signet ring. "Marcus will deliver the warning to Julian Vance, and the Supreme Council will think twice before deploying another contingent onto my cliffs," Valerius murmured, his deep voice carrying the absolute weight of 3 centuries of eternal rule. Evangeline walked down the sweeping stairs, her worn shoes clicking softly against the marble, until she stood 5 feet away from the hybrid king. She pointed a trembling finger at the shattered iron entry doors, her face turning pale as she stared at the ancient crest engraved on his ring. "Julian called you a king, Valerius, and your sister just mentioned an undercover agreement that kept my family in the dark for 20 years. Evangeline stated directly, her voice holding a firm defiance despite her fear. Valerius stepped closer, his cool palm gently supporting her elbow to steady her posture. "Your father made a blood covenant with my bloodline before you were born, Evangeline, to ensure your family's business thrived in Manhattan without supernatural interference," Valerius explained, his velvet voice remaining calm. Rebecca joined them in the center aisle, her expression turning toward a cold, calculating pragmatism. "The covenant is void now that Julian has breached the mansion, brother, and keeping this human here will only invite a full-scale assault from the master hunters." Valerius turned his gaze toward his sister, his jaw clenching tightly. "No one touches what is mine, Rebecca, and I will dismantle the council piece by piece before I surrender her blood to Julian's operatives." He turned back to Evangeline, guiding her toward the master library, where a fireplace cast long shadows across shelves of ancient journals. He poured a glass of water, placing it on a mahogany desk beside an altered map of the Eastern Territories. "You will stay in the West Wing tonight, Evangeline, where my personal wards will shield your pulse from their tracking devices," Valerius instructed. Evangeline looked at the ancient books, her hand hovering over a page that detailed the crown's historical shield. "I need to know the truth about my father's debt, Valerius, because I am not a piece of paper to be bartered between monsters," she said quietly. Valerius closed the journal, his hand resting on the leather cover. "Your father did not sell you, Evangeline, he hid you from them." Valerius did not look back as he closed the heavy mahogany door of the master library, leaving Evangeline inside the safety of his personal boundary. He descended the limestone staircase toward the grand entrance hall, where Rebecca already stood with her hands clasped tightly against her silk gown. The sharp knocking on the iron entry doors ceased, replaced by a low, resonant vibration that traveled straight through the thick stone foundation of the manor. Valerius stepped into the center of the white marble floor, his posture rigid while his dark curls caught the dim light of the overhead chandelier. The massive timber doors groaned aloud as a heavy deadbolt snapped, sliding open to reveal a single visitor standing in the dense white mist of the cliffs. This was Christopher Sterling, Evangeline's father, his gray hair damp from the mountain rain and his breathing labored. He did not carry a weapon, yet his presence made Rebecca draw back 3 feet into the shadow of the master pillars. Christopher looked directly at Valerius, his face pale under the cold exterior light as he adjusted the collar of his coat. "I know the enforcers breached your perimeter an hour ago, Valerius, and I came to ensure my daughter is still breathing," Christopher said, his voice flat and holding no trace of fear. Valerius took a silver pocket watch from his vest, checking the hour with precise, calculated movements before snapping the casing shut. "Evangeline is currently resting in the West Wing under my personal protection, Christopher, which means Julian Vance has already lost his leverage," Valerius murmured. Christopher stepped across the threshold, his leather boots clicking sharply against the white floor until he stood 5 feet from the hybrid king. He pulled a pristine, faded parchment from his inner pocket, revealing a covenant signed in dark ink 3 decades ago. Julian has allied his family with the Supreme Council's master hunters, Valerius, and they are currently tracking her pulse to this cliff, Christopher stated directly, his voice echoing in the vast space. Valerius looked at the parchment, his golden eyes narrowing slightly as the latent energy around his signet ring flared. "Your blood covenant with my family guaranteed her safety from the underworld, Christopher, and my sovereign word does not expire because Julian filed a complaint." Rebecca stepped forward, her voice carrying a cold, severe pragmatism that broke the silence between the 2 men. "The covenant became a liability the moment Julian discovered her location, brother, and keeping a human in this mansion will destroy our territory before the trial even begins." Valerius turned his gaze toward his sister, his jaw clenching tightly. "No one touches what is mine, Rebecca, and I will dismantle Julian's entire coven before I allow a single hunter to cross my threshold." He turned back to Christopher, guiding him toward the master study where the fireplace cast long shadows. He poured a glass of dark liquid, placing it on the desk beside an altered map of Manhattan's territories. "You will leave through the northern pass before dawn, Christopher, while my guards redirect their tracking devices away from the estate," Valerius instructed. Christopher closed his coat, his hand resting on the iron handle of the door. "I did not come to run, Valerius, I came to fight beside the crown." Christopher Sterling did not step away from the study window, his gray eyebrows knitting together as the distant grinding of the estate gates ceased. Valerius set his glass down onto the desk without breaking eye contact with the older man. The sharp knocking on the lower entry doors had stopped, but a low, rhythmic vibration now traveled directly through the thick limestone foundation of the manor. Evangeline emerged from the West Wing corridor, her fingers lightly trailing along the polished wooden balustrade as she navigated the dim, landing toward the study door. She stood near the threshold, her voice low and steady. "Valerius, the iron gates have been completely breached," she said, her breathing shallow but her posture remaining straight. Valerius passed her with incredible speed, his hand extending to block her path before she could take another step toward the master staircase. "Stay inside this library with my sister, Evangeline," he instructed, his velvet voice holding an unarguable authority that resonated through the timber beams. Valerius vanished down the grand staircase, leaving the 2 women in the deep shadow of the upper landing. Evangeline leaned over the railing, watching his tall figure emerge into the absolute center of the white marble hall, just as 3 men in heavy tactical gear broke through the outer perimeter. The leader of the intruders stepped forward, holding a silver vial filled with a glowing, amber fluid that turned the visible white mist of the room into a hazy tint. This was Julian's chief enforcer, a lethal mercenary named Marcus, who had spent decades hunting down rogue bloodlines for the Supreme Council. Marcus raised the vial toward the light, his lip curling into an arrogant smile. "Valerius Vance, the Council has issued a warrant for the immediate removal of the human stowaway under your roof," Marcus announced, his voice carrying clearly up to the landing. Valerius stood perfectly still in the center of the hall, his face pale and unreadable under the dim chandelier. "You crossed the iron boundary of my estate without my permission, Marcus," Valerius replied casually, his tone almost pleasant as he adjusted the platinum signet ring on his finger. Marcus laughed, a sharp sound that echoed off the high limestone walls. "Your crown died a century ago when you chose to hide among the mortals, and your boundaries mean nothing to the council now." Marcus sneered, gesturing for his two men to advance toward the staircase where Evangeline was hiding. Valerius did not draw a weapon. He took a single step forward, his pupils dilating completely until his eyes turned into an endless darkness that swallowed the golden reflection of the light. The air pressure in the grand hall dropped instantly, forcing Marcus to take a step back as his breathing became difficult in the freezing air. Valerius materialized directly in front of the first mercenary, his hand gripping the man's chest plate and driving him into the stone column with a dull throb. The second intruder lunged, but Valerius caught his wrist, twisting it sharply until the heavy iron weapon dropped onto the marble floor. Marcus scrambled backward toward the open doorway, his bravado evaporating as he recognized the ancient hybrid strength unleashed before him. "The council will burn your estate to the ground for this betrayal, Valerius," Marcus yelled, his fingers trembling as he struggled to uncork the amber fluid. Valerius turned his gaze toward the open doorway, his voice dropping into a dangerous whisper. "Tell Julian that I am no longer hiding." Valerius tightened his grip on the silver pocket watch, his knuckles turning white as the structural echo of the front gates sliding shut signaled a complete lockdown of the mansion. Christopher Sterling stood perfectly still beside the mahogany desk, his hand dropping to the iron hilt of his antique cane, while the heavy scent of mountain rain began to mingle with something sharp and foreign in the air. Upstairs in the safety of the West Wing, Evangeline moved away from the stone fireplace, her bare feet pressing silently against the soft wool rugs as she approached the heavy oak door. She stepped onto the upper landing, her eyes scanning the dark corridor before she spotted Rebecca, standing near the master archives with a small leather-bound ledger clutched against her chest. "Valerius, someone has breached the lower courtyard line," Evangeline called out, her heart rate accelerating but her voice remaining remarkably steady. Valerius appeared at the foot of the stairs in less than a heartbeat, his tattered coat trailing through the shadows as he lifted his head to look up at her. "Go back into the study with my sister, Evangeline," he instructed, his velvet tone carrying an absolute, unarguable authority that anchored her to the floorboards. The massive reinforced windows of the main hall suddenly shattered inward, showering the marble steps with thousands of sharp crystal fragments. 3 figures dressed in heavy black tactical armor stepped through the broken frames, their drawn weapons pointing directly at the foot of the master staircase. The leader of the intruders stepped into the light, revealing a tall, heavily scarred mercenary named Marcus, who had spent 40 years enforcing the Supreme Council's boundaries. Marcus raised a silver vial filled with a glowing, amber fluid. The volatile liquid cast a hazy reflection across his cold face. "Valerius Vance, the council has officially revoked your undercover immunity," Marcus announced, his rough voice expanding through the high-vaulted room. Valerius did not draw a weapon. He took a slow step forward, his fingers moving to adjust the heavy platinum signet ring on his right hand. "You crossed the iron boundary of my estate without my permission, Marcus," Valerius replied casually, his golden eyes narrowing slightly as the latent energy around his signet ring flared. Marcus laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the limestone walls. Your crown died a century ago when you chose to live as a low-cost guard for mortals, and your boundaries mean nothing to Julian Vance now. Marcus sneered, gesturing for his men to advance toward the upper landing where Evangeline stood. Valerius looked up at Evangeline, his pupils dilating completely until his eyes turned into an endless darkness that swallowed the reflection of the chandelier. The air pressure in the hall dropped instantly, forcing Marcus to take a step back as his breathing became difficult in the freezing white mist. Valerius materialized directly in front of the first mercenary, his hand gripping the enforcer's chest plate and driving him into the stone column with a dull throb. The second intruder lunged, but Valerius caught his wrist, twisting it sharply until the heavy iron weapon dropped onto the marble floor. Marcus scrambled backward toward the shattered window, his bravado evaporating as he recognized the original hybrid strength unleashed before him. Julian has already allied with the master hunters, Valerius, Marcus yelled, his hands shaking as he struggled to uncork the amber fluid. Valerius turned his gaze toward the open courtyard, his voice dropping into a dangerous whisper. "Tell Julian that I am coming for his territory." Marcus retreated through the shattered frame of the tall library window, his hands shaking so violently that the silver vial slipped from his fingers and shattered against the stone patio outside. Valerius did not look down at the amber fluid soaking into the dirt. He stood perfectly still near the desk, his breathing completely even as his long lashes cast narrow shadows across his pale cheekbones. The dark obsidian in his pupils slowly receded, returning his eyes to their natural, calm state. Evangeline stepped out from behind the heavy oak door of the guest suite, her hand sliding down the smooth fabric of her dress as she walked toward her father. Christopher Sterling leaned heavily against his mahogany cane, a faint smile breaking through his exhaustion as he watched the perimeter guards secure the courtyard. "Marcus will not return to Manhattan, Valerius," Christopher said, his voice flat and holding no remaining tension. Valerius took a clean linen handkerchief from his vest pocket and methodically wiped a small smudge of dust from his platinum signet ring. "Julian Vance has lost his chief enforcer, Christopher, which means the Supreme Council will require a new strategy before they attempt to breach these cliffs again," Valerius murmured, his voice rich with centuries of quiet authority. He turned toward Evangeline, his features softening into a protective warmth that completely altered his fierce demeanor. "The Council's tracking devices cannot penetrate the limestone foundation of this West Wing, Evangeline, so you are no longer a target for their mercenaries," he added gently. Evangeline looked at the heavy leather binders lining the library shelves, then turned to face both men with her chin lifted high. "My father says you hid me from the underworld for 20 years, Valerius, but I want to see the original documents of the Covenant," she stated directly. Valerius opened the lower drawer of the desk, pulling out a thick parchment document sealed with a heavy crimson wax imprint of the Royal Crescent crest. He placed the parchment into her hands, his cool fingers brushing against her warm skin for a brief second. Evangeline unrolled the document, her eyes scanning the faded black ink that detailed her father's ancient agreement with the hybrid court. The terms state that the Crown provides complete protection to the Sterling bloodline in exchange for an exclusive alliance, which means Julian never had a legal claim over my life, she murmured. Valerius stood beside her, his tall figure casting a protective shadow across the desk. "Julian used the auction house as a distraction to isolate you from your father, Evangeline, because he knew he could never defeat my guards in an open territory conflict," Valerius explained. Rebecca stepped into the library from the main landing, her emerald silk gown rustling softly against the threshold as she carried a tray of fresh espresso. She set the small cups down on the desk, her expression holding a newfound respect as she looked at Evangeline. "The Council has officially suspended Julian's operating license in the Eastern Territories. Brother, and his remaining assets are being liquidated by the treasury, Rebecca announced. Christopher took a cup from the tray, his posture relaxing completely. We will return to Manhattan tomorrow to reclaim the Sterling estate, Evangeline, but our alliance with the crown remains permanent, he said. Valerius lifted his cup, his golden eyes meeting Evangeline's gaze with absolute certainty. No one touches what is mine, Evangeline, and your home is wherever the crown stands, he whispered. Evangeline smiled, her fingers tightening around the edge of the ancient parchment.